I thought it was very interesting from an intellectual point of view, and I could follow, it's the sort of logic of your arguments there and the logic of why one would meditate. But I hadn't yet had the sort of first person experience that
Mm.
suggested to me meditation was something useful. So why don't we start by talking about how you came to realize that meditation was something worth spending time on?
Well, I guess I was about your age when you picked up waking up. I mean, I think I was 18 or 19, and took. I had my first experience with MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy, or I guess Molly now. I don't know which is the most common term. Um, which I took at that point. No one in my circle had mentioned it, or much less taken it. I mean, it was before the whole rave thing kicked off some years later, and so it was just it had just become Schedule One, I think, a couple of years before, but it was still just this was a drug that had been in circulation in the kind of psychotherapeutic community, um, and probably still was, and I forget exactly um, how it was even framed to me, but I just knew that this was not a party drug. This was an opportunity to discover something about the nature of my mind. And so I took it very much with that expectation. And that's what happened. I mean, I had a very clear view of how much more sane I could be. Right. I had a default picture of what was possible that certainly didn't include feeling things like unconditional love or feeling radically free of all of my kind of psychodynamics. As this was the water in which I was swimming, and I had no real reference point to even think about what might be beyond it. But this experience um, is an experience I think many people have on MDMA. It's just, I think if you're at a rave or at a party, it may not be as clear as it was for me at the time. But the two lessons that came out of it were that, one, it was possible to feel much better about everything than I was tending to feel, and much saner, and um, that this wasn't that the implications of this were not merely that MDMA is an amazing drug, or drugs are interesting, or that that psychopharmacology is a real thing. No, it was actually that there was a way of paying attention to my moment-to-moment experience, and a kind of an ethical engagement with the world, and a way of thinking that was causing me not to feel this good, or see my place in the world this clearly as my default. So I recognized it was possible to have a kind of firmware upgrade of one's mind that didn't entail just taking more MDMA or any other drug. And so
I'm curious about that, because I've done MDMA as well, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about my experiences in a moment. But I'm curious, what caused you not to interpret it as simply evidence that MDMA is a great drug that I should do more of? Because most people who have that experience, it doesn't suggest that there's a way to somehow cultivate my mind when I'm sober to become more like this. That's not obvious, right? From taking it.
Yeah. No, I actually had landed with a book. In fact, it was given to me in the same person who had given me the MDMA had given me one of Ram Dass's books, which I had never read. What was that?
Good friend.
Yeah. And I hadn't read it. Actually, I'd had the book on my shelf, I think, for some years before I took the MDMA, but it was sort of, they were joined conceptually, having come from the same person. And so after I had that experience, I read the book, and then that put it in the context of some kind of path, and I didn't. I guess two pieces of fine print here are relevant. One is I don't think what I experienced on MDMA is the center of the bullseye, contemplatively or spiritually, or just, it's not the thing that one should appropriately aim for, in meditation practice, although that experience is there to be had. it's somewhat adjacent to what I think the goal is, but still, it was enough to get me started. And yeah, and that the book, almost any book of that sort probably would have worked at that point. Anything that was situating that kind of change in conscious experience in the context of any kind of traditional path of practice would have gotten me interested in sort of the non-drug search for to kind of recapitulate that experience at that point.
Yeah.